Good evening, everybody. We seem to be all here, so we'll start early. And I'll declare the meeting open. And next to one of our youngest councillor, we have a youth councillor that we'd like to introduce you all to Mahara Swanson Hall. Welcome to Mahara, one of our young achievers. Nice to have you at the table. Councillor Sarank, you will open the meeting, please, with our prayer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this evening, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
And we have no apologies. So we don't have to accept the apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Declare an interest with recommendation 1 on page 48 and recommendation 2 on page 48. It is not as per recommendation 1 on page 52 or recommendation 2 on page 56. It is to do with the, it says that the report recommendations from other committees be received. And the items in question is the city focus and the final inner city parking plan, as being a retailer very close to both those items.
You're declaring an interest. Thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any urgent business?
Your Worship.
Yes, Councillor Donaldson, then
I
Councillor...
wonder if councillors in confidential could be given an update on an ongoing dispute that Mr. Michael is dealing with, that we're all being copied into. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wonder if I attended a public transport meeting in Tauranga yesterday. There is extreme concern about the public bus service here in Rotorua. I just wondered if I could update councillors on the matter at the end of the meeting this evening. Thank you.
Our interest, thank you for that. We now move to item 5 and welcome Roku Mihinui from the Te Arawa Lakes Trust. Welcome to our table, Roku. I see you didn't stand for the Te Arawa board, so it's nice to have you here as a trust representative to present the Te Arawa Cultural Values Framework. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fellow councillors, mami hoki kia koutou I te ahi nei, tēnā koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to present this work that the Te Arawa Lakes Trust have been doing in conjunction with the Te Arawa people. Te Tūāpapa o ngā wai o Te Arawa. A little translation, Tūāpapa is a framework of the water of Te Arawa. And it came about for a number of reasons. As part of the Rotorua Te Arawa Lakes program, and in particular the vision and strategy in the last 2 lines there, while recognising and providing for the traditional relationship of Te Arawa with the ancestral lakes. This has been an outstanding area of work that the Te Arawa Lakes Trust needed to complete around the settlement legislation per se. So thankfully we've been able to kick that off over the last 6 months. It also comes under the goals of the strategy group as well. Goal 3 pertaining to mātauranga Māori, Goal 4 to the Te Arawa values, and Goal 7 the habitat kairoto, or the ecosystems. Each one of them intrinsically linked into the work around the lake's water quality as well. Once we identified those particular values, we needed to then look, those particular goals, we then needed to identify what those cultural values were for Te Arawa. And over a series of 5 hui we had with our people, we came up with the framework that we have called Te Tūāpapa o ngā wai o Te Arawa. There was some quite intense debate in terms of the framework itself, but also in terms of the values that Te Arawa recognised. We put together, in terms of our engagement, some questions to the people, and one of them was around these 8 values that we identified that generally resonate within every aspect of our Te Arawa people and their relationship, not just with the water, but with themselves and the wider community. The 8 values were accepted generally by our people. However, the concerns that were raised at a number of hui was that while these are recognised values and have their own right to be acknowledged, many of them have been used by various other organisations, other groupings that, in the view of Te Arawa, didn't have a direct relationship to the culture of Te Arawa and or their relationship with the lake and or the lakes or the waters generically. I summarised this in the final meeting when we were putting this together, that the feedback from the majority of the hui and the participants was that the tangas and the angas have been used by others and have grown or created their own meanings for them, and therefore did not apply as appropriately as previously. So the agreement was to keep those values to the side, but put together a framework where they can be better recognised and implemented. And so we came up with, we're dealing with the Te Arawa lakes, we're dealing with the waterways, we're dealing with the puna and the springs. Now, the fallback position for the Te Arawa people was the 1875 claim, Waitangi 1875 claim that was lodged by the Te Arawa Lakes Trust for the ownership of the water in the lakes, streams, waterways and puna. Therefore, for the people of Te Arawa, it seemed appropriate that the framework was based on the water itself, given it's the only outstanding matter at this time. Why? Now that's not a question. Why was the first part of the framework? And it looks at the water in all its dimensions. Also, how does the Western science analyse the water itself, and how do they interrelate? So it wasn't just about what Te Arawa thought water meant, but also the Western science that had been produced over the years. That became the apex of the leading edge of the Tūāpapa. And the next one that we felt was very important as well was Waiariki, literal translation, waters of the gods. Again, more importantly, Waiariki is the region that we reside in as well. And for one particular hui, it had a special importance for them because of their residence with, on, and interlinked with the Waiariki and Whakarewarewa. The next value, we broke it down. If those two were the core, then what were the key components that made that up or gave effect to those? The next one we identified was wai ora, and again a literal translation, wai, water, ora, health. So the health of the water. But not only the health of the water, if the water was healthy, then everything else tended to be as well. And again, that linked back to the vision statement of the Te Arawa Lakes Trust, toi tū te wai, toi tū te whenua, toi tū te tangata, healthy water, healthy lands, healthy people. The next one is, while you can have physical health, you also need spiritual health. So the next critical aspect of the framework was wairua. Again, literal translation, water two, or two waters. But more importantly, recognized as the inner spirit of people. And water itself has its own spirit. And some of the work going on at a national level recognizes te mana o te wai. as being the spiritual, the intrinsic value of the water itself. So when you start combining these components, you're building the framework of a body, of a person as well. And the last one we came up with was Waipa, which literally means the rhythm and flow, water, rhythm and flow. But more importantly for Te Arawa, it also means the songs, the stories, the cultural heritage relationship that they have with the waters. Some of the stories in particular, one that was very well articulated was the Taniwha Kaitiaki at Taniwha Springs, and the linkage there in terms of their relationship. So that was a story, but also we cannot forget the internationally famous song, Po Kare Kare Ana, which relates to a story of a song that relates to a brave woman swimming across Lake Rotorua. So again, the interlinkage there. So these were some of the examples that came up at the separate meetings we had. We then formed a working party to collate all of the findings. And you have the book in front of you, and it gives you the appendices that shows you some of that as well. And as a result of the working team's analysis of the feedback, this is the framework we arrived at. That was the easy part, actually. The hardest part was getting that through our people. And then how do you connect those values up? This was, we felt, was going to be the hardest step along the way. How do you translate those feelings, those stories, those best wishing thinking into actions? And we felt we needed some values to underpin that. One was around the lakes themselves and also Te Arawa's relationship with the lakes, but also the greater and wider thinking of Te Ao Māori. We included that because there are other examples within Te Ao Māori that could assist to consolidate the Tūāpapa as well, or the framework as well. Particularly with Te Arawa, and I mentioned that earlier, is with their long-standing connection with the lakes, and also some of the work that they had been doing in their own areas. For example, the Tūhourangi people with the Puarenga stream, as a result of the reconsenting process for the water take in the Waipa Valley there. They have been proactive in doing a cultural health assessment that hasn't stopped. They're still continuing that in a joint venture at the moment with Wairiki Polytechnic and Scion. So there was some of the work that came out of or that could relate to this particular principle. The other thing was, once you've got them, how do you embed them into the programs? How do you educate both those who need to have regard for them, both in terms of the management and operations, but also any person who might be making an application, such as a resource consent. By capturing Te Ao Māori values as a whole, we felt it would make it a bit easier for people to understand or connect to those values as well. And one of the strong debates was around the knowledge that Te Arawa have of their waterways. And there were a couple of examples shared of their own bad experiences where in certain situations, one was a resource consent matter, that their information, knowledge of that particular area was regarded by one of the science experts as hearsay and anecdotal evidence, strongly refuted by those presenters as being their own mātauranga or their own knowledge that has been built up over the years. So again, how do you encapsulate a framework that can explain and lead people or assist people to understand those particular values? And the last part we looked at was to give it some effect, we needed to identify those areas of significance within the lakes. So we had to do some sort of mapping around those sites. And I was fortunate the other day, yesterday, to be at Wāhia Marae, where our people, Tuarangi Ngāti Wāhia, have engaged with culture and heritage to look at having our village deemed or registered as a site of cultural significance. And during that particular engagement, some of the information that has come out around the criteria, particularly under the new act that they have, was really useful. That could be applied in this instance as well. How do you identify a site of significance, and what is the process you need to go through to register it? So that learning was very useful as well. Koina, kōrero atu ki a koutou. That's the end of the presentation, councillors. I'm open to any questions. Before I do, the other bit of information that is useful for the community to know about with regards to this work, during our engagement with the Ministry for the Environment on the wider freshwater issues, they shared with us the change in their reporting accountability to the government on environmental matters. And some of you may have seen I think came out yesterday, the draft criteria they have around that environmental reporting. And there's a section that quite clearly identifies area of mātauranga or cultural areas of recognition. And they're asking for comments on that. When I saw that particular area, I approached them and said, look, we're doing this project on cultural values framework. I think that this could align very well with some of the questions you're asking around how do you give effect to these values. If you've got a puti available, I'll be quite happy to sit down and discuss with you how you can allow us to use some of that. We've been talking 2 weeks. We are looking at signing off next week on a deed of agreement on them supporting us, converting those cultural values framework into policy speak that could be criteria to guide other parties in terms of the engagements around the lake. So we just received the draft deed yesterday afternoon. So, kia ora, Ms. Amini.
Are there any questions? I just have, me to pick up?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yes, I do have, and kia ora, and thank you for your presentation, Roku. And it's very interesting, the document, and probably very timely as well. Can I just ask you, the Three Waters project from that local government New Zealand is undertaking at present, this could be quite helpful for them as well?
Yes.
Yes, so I just thought about that. The other thing I note is that the framework is to be reviewed after 1 year, and I guess to see that people are clear about what they can do, how they can use it, etc. Do you envisage thereafter, perhaps every 3 to 5 years, because you wouldn't be reviewing it annually all the time, would you?
Good question, and our short answer to that is we are looking at other models that are around the country at the moment that other iwi hapu are using. We've been directly engaged with Ngāi Tahu, who have 2 separate models that they're using down the deep south and then around Lake Waiora. There are some learnings already from that can be incorporated. But we always believe that this is just a starting point, that it's a iterative document. There's going to be new information that will come that would assist in the development and refinement of it.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Roko, for the report tonight. The report you've given us, councillors, is actually very comprehensive and in a language which everybody should be able to understand totally without confusing them at all. I take it you're going to make press announcements and go to the Daily Post and the Rotorua Review and the radio stations to let the people of Rotorua know that this document has been produced?
Yes, we felt it was firstly our obligation to the partners of the Rotorua Taro Lake Strategy Group in the first instance. I made a presentation this morning to the Regional Council who endorsed the report. The main reason is that it's a document I would say, a piece of work that's outstanding around the strategy. And the partners of the strategy need to be comfortable enough with what we've produced before we go to the wider public.
Just one side issue. On page 10, what a lot of people know as a blue and green lake, you've only got one of the lakes listed there. Is the other one taken out, is not listed for a specific reason? Was it tapu or was it...
The Green Lake, Lake Rotorua is not one of the lakes under the Te Arawa Lake Settlement. It's owned separately by one of the iwi hapu.
Gee, thank you also, Roko, for the presentation. One of the things as portfolio lead for sport and recreation is we've just developed our sport and recreation strategy. And I note on page 29 you've made specific mention that you want to work with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council in the implementation of the Rotorua Lakes recreation strategy. In our sport and recreation strategy, there is a huge emphasis on water, in the water, the sport and recreation values that are required. As Te Arawa Lakes Trust, are you happy to receive a copy of its draft at the moment and to work with us in developing that up, so that we're in a true partnership sort of role between us and Te Arawa? We don't need the regional council, just the two of us, because their lakes recreation strategy has been developed by them for this area, but ours is Rotorua focused. So we wondered if you'd be willing to work with us in bringing that strategy up. We've already talked to other stakeholders, Te Puni Kōkiri and the other sport and recreation groups, Waka, we've involved a lot of people, so you're quite happy to work along with us and look at that as well as part of the project.
Thank you for the invitation and look forward to engaging with you, councillors.
Councillor McVicker.
Your Worship, Rockwell, thank you for your presentation. Just one question. You made reference to the issue of sites of significance. Will the day come when they will be formally recognised on documents that Council, for example, produces in the future? Because I detect in the past there has been a bit of a reluctance to do so.
Yeah, the criteria I referred to allows for that under the new culture and heritage determinations. Wāhi tapu has been the only definition that they've used. The interpretation by many Māori iwi and particularly Te Arawa, wāhi tapu are sites that are sacred that they prefer not to share. The new criteria they have or qualifier they have is wāhi tupuna. And the translation of the wāhi tupuna is those areas of significance that the iwi hapu have with a particular environmental area that they're prepared to share that knowledge with. So you'll have the two areas of classification, wāhi tapu and wāhi tupuna. The wāhi tapu would be registered and be available upon request and permission of request. The wāhi tupuna would be available publicly.
Publicly, is that what you're saying?
There will be a document that would list them, and not in the wāhi tapu, they won't be identified. They would be subject to permission. The wāhi tupuna will be open and available. Two different categories here. The other thing too, Councillor McVicker, that with a lot of those wāhi tapu interpretations by our own people, there was almost, no, we're not even going to go there. But now with the new act in place, it gives them the opportunity to assess whether those wāhi tapu could be shifted into this other area. They would need to define for themselves the criteria as to why they would remain wāhi tapu and then confidential.
Thank you for that clarification and bringing this to the table. We were just very aware of your work too, Roku, with the iwi Leaders Forum and that very significant work on water and where we go nationally, really, on water. So thank you for that. And yesterday I met and saw an astonishing digital app with the Iwi River Trust that can start to tell the story digitally on your phone of these sites and these stories around the rivers and waterways, and I think when that's ready, it'd be a great thing for us to bring to council later, because it's astonishing. Part of, a digital strategy, really.
You're right, Your Worship, and those are some of the linkages that we're exploring right now with our Wihapu organisations. What have they done? Save us, if you like, going down that path if they've already done it, and it could be adopted or implemented here as well. Yes, I was aware of that one.
Oh, mind-blowing. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We don't need to have all those in favour. Thank you very much for coming to the table.
Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora.
And now we move to confirmation, item 6, page 6, the minutes of the council meeting on the 1st of October. Do I have a mover? I've missed the mover, so who? Thank you, Councillor Sarang. Councillor Gould. Thank you. That the minutes of that meeting be confirmed as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And now we move to page 17. I'll just give people the time to look at page 17. And that was well, there you go. Thank you, Councillor Gould. I would ask for a mover. A seconder. Councillor Rotorua Tate, thank you. That the minutes of the 1st of October be confirmed as a true and accurate record. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. We now move to page 17. Oh no, we've done that one. Sorry. We now move to page 35. The Your Choice hearing. Ask for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Gould. Councillor Sturt to second. You can't? No. Councillor Rotorua Tate to second. That the minutes of the council hearing on Your Choice 2016 election review held the 3rd of November 2015 be confirmed as a true and accurate record. All those in favour? Yes?
Under the rules under the Local Government Act, it quite clearly states that those who hear the submissions are able to partake in the vote in terms of the direction that the electoral review that we are charged to do every so often. Can I assure you that whilst I wasn't present at the meeting, and I'd seek your ruling on this because if I can't vote, well, I might as well leave the meeting, but I have watched the submissions on the video, and I have read all the submissions that were submitted. So the ones that weren't in writing, I watched on the replay online, and also the summary of the submissions from page 36 on, attached to these minutes, give me a full and clear position in terms of where different submitters felt their submission should head. So I seek your ruling, Madam Chair, that I can partake in the vote, because I was on the working party, and this is only one meeting that I missed, but I have increased my knowledge by and thank God for the live streaming. We can go back and have a look at it.
And, well, all we're doing in this item is really the minutes. We're just approving the minutes, and when we move over to item 8, we'll be considering our recommendation there, and I will allow you to take part. Thank you. Put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. We move on now to recommendations from other committees. And this is page 48, that the recommendations from other committees be received. Do I have a mover? And thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Yes.
Thank you, Your Worship.
That we take each item individually.
Okay.
Yeah, it's better.
I just have a question with regard to the city focus, an issue that was raised with me by a member of the public today. and that is apparently the revamp of the City Focus is going to lose 16 car parks. Could the Chief Executive please comment on that?
May ask the question and we'll answer it there, Councillor Kent. All right. All those in favour that we receive the recommendations, that's just receiving them. Please aye. Carried. And we'll move that the... Oh no, we won't do the point 2 yet. We'll go to the recommendations on each vote. Yes.
I take it you'll be approving the minutes on page 49 of the single piece of paper which we've received tonight?
That's right. We're doing them one by one. Yes. Thank you. Now we'll move to the City Focus Refresh. Recommendation 1. Councillor Kent, before we vote on this, your question is a valid question to the staff. Would you like to repeat it, Councillor Kent?
Yes, it was raised by a member of the public who questioned me on the fact that the revised City Focus is actually going to remove 15 or 16 car parks. Could the Chief Executive please comment on this? Because I believe this issue was raised by councillors, and I believe we were going to have a report back once we looked at a final design.
Yeah. Yes.
JP, would you like to answer that, please?
Your Worship, the specific plan that was presented to you at the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee did not change any of the parking entering the City Focus, either from Hinimoa Street or through to Tanakai Street. So there was no intention to remove any car parking in those spaces. What was raised at the meeting was a request from Councillor Sarank and Councillor Sturt that we ask the question about whether we should continue with the median parking on the western side of Hinimoa Street. And we had assured councillors that before we finalised the design, we would ask or have some sort of discussions with the retail properties and consider options in that space. So that would be, if anything, an addendum to the project, but what you approved at the meeting last week was specifically just about the City Focus area, and we had not touched anything to do with parking on either side.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Chair, JP, can you just confirm the time frame of when the City Focus, if this recommendation goes forward, one of the recommendations is that the City Focus to come down. Can you please confirm the dates that this will take place, or whether the eyesight will be available till such and such a date?
Your Worship, at this stage, we'd signalled in the report that the building that sits within the City Focus area will be demolished before Christmas, and on the same basis we may be looking at the sales before Christmas as well. We have no specific dates at this stage, and we're still checking on the quotes and availability for contractors to undertake that work, but that was signalled that that piece of work would be undertaken before Christmas.
Further elaboration, which was my question, that has been asked, but you mentioned the building and then the poles and the pole, but there's only about 6 weeks to Christmas or 7 weeks to Christmas. How confident are we that we can actually get that work done without absolutely disrupting the centre city, because it will be a construction area, it'll be a hard hat area, nobody will be able to go anywhere near, so there'll be no through pedestrian traffic at all. So how does it all work in such a busy time of the year?
Your Worship, that question was canvassed with the retailers in that vicinity, so that was part of the discussions that were undertaken with approximately 50 odd retailers in the vicinity of the intersection. My understanding in discussions that have been undertaken with contractors, that the area will be limited to approximately the very specific area around the building and about halfway into the current city focus. So there will be ability for people to circulate up and down Tūtanakai Street and around on both sides of Hinimoa Street. So that's my understanding of the proposal so far. And as far as the timing is concerned, that was canvassed with the retailers, and that has also been where they signalled their other preference for the main part of the work to be undertaken after April. That includes the main part of a contract. So what we're intending there is the looking at the roading configuration. So that's the traffic circulation elements, as well as the more major structural pieces like altering the gardens and the laying out of the various lawns and pieces of furniture through that space. So that really the real detail of the project will be undertaken in that period after April of next year.
Christmas, we're just looking at, really, we believe, the demolition of the building.
That is correct.
All of these items were in the paper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will we, at all times as councillors, be kept abreast of the actual costs incurred, so that if there is going to be an overrun, we can give the answers to the public at the appropriate time, rather than have it leaked if it is not complementary to our projected costs?
I think I'll answer that. We would be reporting through to Ops and Monitoring, and that is the appropriate forum for those questions. But I do take a little bit of insult that they'd be leaked. I think we should put them forward through the appropriate committee at the right time. I totally agree with you. So you're asking for a standing report on the upgrade of the city focus. Yeah. Councillor Gould?
As the council closes down over Christmas for 2 or 3 weeks in January, it would be nice if council's got a regular, weekly or 10-day update on the timing of the particular project, because then we will know how long it's going to take and whether there's any problems which has arisen, by taking down the complex or the sales.
Councillor Gould, you weren't at the meeting when this was all discussed, but I hear your request for a communication plan around this project for councillors to be informed. Councillor Stewart?
Chair, this is one of the reasons why I was one of the few people who supported the retention of the sales, because I think the disruption is going to be big enough with the removal of the eyesight, but the general disruption of taking those massive big poles out and the cranes that are going to be required, because I can remember the cranes when they were put in, the big round steel posts, and God knows where they're going to end up. That's why I supported the retention of the sales, because it would limit the disruption. But, Madam Chair, other than the inner city revitalisation group, certainly I've been around the community since we made the decision on the 4th of November, and there's general disquiet within the community that this has only the support of the inner city people who flocked, and certain people went into the store that flocked in their droves to ensure that the option that has been agreed to, and I'm resigned to the fact that will happen, flocked to the IDS store to make sure that particular option went through. So there is disquiet within the community about the cost, and I hear that from Councillor Bentley reflected in his question. The disruption to the through traffic and the pedestrianisation. I was in the CBD, Madam
Councillor Stewart, these are questions for clarification around the recommendation.
Well, I can still amend the recommendation. There's nothing stopping me. And that's what I'm leading to.
That's just not a question, though. We're just seeking questions around the recommendations.
Oh, I've said enough. 'Cause, 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 'c
It? Yes, so it's recommendation 1, 1 and 2. And when, yes, 1 and 2 of 1, I'm going to put that recommendation. It would appear, does anyone wish to speak to that? Now is the time if you wish to speak. The time was before for clarification. No, I put that vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Certainly. A division? Yes. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Got that, Carol? Oh, Rick? Yes, 4. And those against? We'll just get this over first.
So, councillors, those voting for the motion were Councillor Donaldson, Hunt, Kent, Mayor Chadwick, Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Rotorua Tate, Councillor Tapsell, and Councillor Waipa. Those against, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Kent, Councillor McVicker, and Councillor Sarank.
No, Councillor McVicker voted for.
Right.
And Councillor Gould abstained.
So, councillors, the motion is carried.
We now move to the finer inner city parking plan, recommendation 2, 1, 2 and 3. Thank you, you move, you second. Are there any questions for clarifications? There appear to be none. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Pardon? Against? Yes. Yes, Councillor Kent. Councillor Sarank, do you want yours recorded against? Oh, you're for. Sorry. That's right. I'm just... Yep. And Councillor Gould abstained. 3? 1? Yeah. 1 and 2. 3. Could we just call to order a little bit, because we're going rather fast for our recorder. So now we're on recommendation 3 and you're revised, so we clarify this so it's clear to everybody. You're moving recommendation 3, 1 and 2. You're seconding 1 and 2. You weren't there, Councillor Gould. Yes, Councillor Sarank seconds. I'll accept her second. Right, are there any questions for clarification? There appear to be none.
During the discussion and the debate at the committee level, there was general agreement that there is going to be a review of the appropriateness of the operation of the Kurau Park Market. And I hope staff have taken that on board and that will occur and come through the committee structure.
That was a question about the Kurau Park Market. And yeah, it's the Rotary Market. Yeah.
Going
Just
to be a
for staff
review
to
on
note.
its operation and how it's being dealt with.
Yes, that's to be noted outside of this recommendation, though. Okay. So I'm going to, there appear to be no other questions. I'm going to put recommendation 3, 1 and 2. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And now we move to, oh, this is a different one, the horse paddock. Thank you. I was going to say the Minister for Sport and Recreation, but thank you, Councillor Stewart. You move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rotorua Tate. That's recommended. Yes.
Point of order. I'm not sure that recommendation 2 is actually correct. Wasn't it subject to resolving some issues?
Is that the lease you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And item 2. Yeah.
It was subject to the access issues being resolved or something like that?
So we should. That was definitely an issue that was raised in the meeting. If you could, please.
Subject to the access issues being finalised.
So that's an amendment to recommendation 1.2.
Yes.
That the lease be granted to the Rotorua BMX Club for a total period of 20 years, subject to access. The legal issues relating to access be
being
resolved.
settled. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Now we move to staff reports, item 8, 8.1. And if we just go to page 51, I call for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report Your Choice 2016 election review be received. Councillor Rotorua Tate moved. Councillor Bentley seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you, Una. We thought it was a good idea that you have another presentation.
Before I start, I'll just ask Rick if he would pull up the presentation on the screen, please. Good evening, councillors. So this is the final decision making for the Your Choice 2016 election review. Just going to take you through a couple of slides here just to put the whole process in context again. So just remembering a representation review must be undertaken at least every 6 years. And there are many councils throughout the country at the moment undertaking this same process. In the representation review, there are some factors that need to be considered, and those are around how many councillors should represent a district. And there's some rules around that, from a minimum of 6 to a maximum of 30, and that includes the count of the mayor in that number there. Then you also look at whether you wish to have elections and elect councillors from across the whole district, or whether you split the district into wards. If you go with a ward system, you also have to stipulate what those boundaries of each ward would be, and what are the communities that are made up in that. You also then need to look at how many councillors would then represent each ward. And finally, you also look at whether you establish or disestablish community boards. So back in February, you'll remember we established a working party to lead the engagement on this particular piece of work. And that working party was led by Councillor Mary Peka Tate, and our community members were Arawa Bray, Brian Eagle and Jill Nicholas. And I'd just like to make mention that Jill Nicholas is with us in attendance this evening as well. And that working party was also made up of councillors, and though we were joined by Councillor Tapsell and Councillor Sturt. So from April to July, the working party undertook an engagement phase, which was really getting out there in the community, making people aware of what the representation was all about and getting people's feedback on those particular items up there. So for the purposes of today, we are here at the 12th of November. So we're at the end, effectively, of stage 2, which is making a final decision on the representation arrangements for the 2016 elections. On making a decision today, we then go into phase 3, which is an objection and appeal stage before a final decision is made. So these dates here, the 19th of November to the 19th of December, are the formal legal dates. So by the 19th of November, we have to have published a public notice which opens up, publishes what the final decision of tonight is, and then opens that up for a period of objections or appeals. If during that period of time the council does receive an objection, all our information, our proposal, all of our feedback, the engagement phases that we've been through, the consultation phase that we've been through, will then go off to the Local Government Commission, and they will review all of the work, and they will then make a final ruling on what the final representation arrangement would be. And that would be in April, and that is subject to any appeals or objections. So just want to make it really clear that during the engagement phase, the working party came up with and developed a set of objectives that they then used to base the proposal on, and they were around the need for a change, that there was a need for a rural and a lakes voice, and that the opportunity to be involved in local decision making as and when topics and projects arise where people have an interest in, that they can be involved. That the representation model is fair, and probably one of the most important ones is that people really wanted the ability to be able to vote for as many councillors as they could sitting around the table. So the proposal, of which was adopted on the, well, it was approved to go out for consultation on the 26th of August, was based around 11 elected members, so 10 councillors and 1 mayor. It was an at-large system, which means that any one person anywhere in the district can have a vote for up to 10 councillors and the 1 mayor. And that we look at having 2 community boards. So one community board to represent the lakes, and another is established to represent the rural community. You will recall that in that initial proposal that the Working Party put to you, that they also put forward a number of what they classed as future considerations. This is outside of the sort of the mandate of what the Working Party is able to recommend to you, but they were really, they really wanted the council to, through the work that they had been doing, just wanted to be able to see that you can go further and you can go, in terms of looking at local decision making and local involvement, you can go further than just the traditional representation model. So you will remember the Working Party put forward things like, oh, what's happened? I'm getting trigger happy. That the use of, continuing the use of portfolios, the Working Party really do see how that connection of a councillor leading a portfolio has allowed people to have that interaction and that ability to go to a councillor. That going forward, further development around the use of locational councillors, and remembering that that's sort of along the lines of a buddy councillor system, but sort of pointing out that there is more training and support required around really getting that role up and running. Also, that the work around community-led development is continued, and in going forward we're always looking at building on that capacity and capability. The Working Party have also suggested to you that going forward the delegations and the powers of the community boards are reassessed, and that if we're really serious about decisions being made for local people at the local level, that a consideration be given to what the powers of those community boards may be, and in terms of whether budget allocation could be delegated to them. And finally, that the chair of each community board sits at the committee level table and has the ability to vote at those council committees. So just going back to engagement and consultation, the engagement phase, which was undertaken from, got the wrong date up there, sorry, it was April to July. There were 553 responses to that, with a lot more people who were involved in a face-to-face through the very extensive amount of work that the Working Party undertook. And all of that initial feedback was what was used to drive the initial proposal put forward by the Working Party. Then following then there was an actual formal consultation phase, and that was through the month of September. And during that time, we received 52 submissions, and of that, 9 of those were heard. So just looking at the breakdown of that in terms of reflecting on what the proposal put forward, was that if you look at 10 councillors, there were 34 of those 52 submissions in favour for the 10 councillors, and we had 18 responses saying stay with the 12. When you consider an at-large wards or a mixed system, 44 people were in favour of the large, 6 for wards and 2 for a mixed. Looking at the community board, there were 38 in favour of retaining the community board and 14 not. And in terms of the establishment of a new community board to represent the rural communities, 37 were in favour of that and 15 no. If I just go back to the Working Party objectives and proposals, just, in a snapshot, that proposal that was put forward by the Working Party clearly shows that it has met all of those objectives that the Working Party set out to achieve. I think at this stage we do need to recognise that during the hearings there was a significant proposal put forward, which was very different to the initial proposal and quite different to what had been coming through from the written hearings and those other hearings that came in and we heard. In terms of looking back at the objectives, we've done an assessment there and say that yes, that proposal did tick the boxes around yes, it was a change. Yes, it did propose a voice for the rural community. That it also does provide opportunities to be involved in local decision making. But when you look at the sort of the fairness test and the test of being able to vote for as many councillors as possible, those two checks or those two objectives weren't met through that. Just to reiterate the timetable again, so following the decision made tonight, the decision will be opened up for any objections and appeals, and if they are received, then all of that information would be directed to the Local Government Commission, with a final decision expected by the 10th of April. So I'll leave it at that point if anybody's got any questions or wants me to clarify any parts of that.
Thank you, Una, and there will be a few, I'm sure. Councillor Hunt and Councillor Sturt have designated, and Councillor Gould.
Una, could you clarify at what point we would look at the delegations and the consideration of adding Hamarana into the Lakes Community Board and having 5 members? At what point would that be discussed?
Can I just get you to clarify, because I think there's a couple of questions in there. So the first one, I believe, is around when can we sort of look at the delegations? Yeah. So That, at this point in time, is a decision for the incoming council, but if this council wished to take on board those suggestions and considerations of the working party, work at this point could be undertaken to develop that as a framework so that it's ready on the table for consideration when the new council is elected.
To that, so that would also apply if a rural community board was put together, of how many there would be and which areas would that cover?
No, that is done now.
That is, okay,
yes.
That's set.
Just to clarify, the decision that you make tonight, if you go with establishment of a rural community board, the area has already been mapped out. At a mesh block level, it is clearly defined by what is classed as a rural property versus an urban property. That boundary has been worked out. And the initial proposal also suggests that the structure of the working party is 4 members elected to the working party, to the community board, and 1 elected member is nominated onto that, which is different to what we've got now because it is 2 nominated councillors. Hamarana, we've gone back and had a look at that, and I might just have to direct this one to Rick, who's been doing all the work on the mesh blocks, but I'll answer it, and Rick, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. Hamarana, there is a line of yes, and those ones are included. So the ones that are directly associated with the lake are included in the Lakes Community Board. Then above that, they are rural. Yeah.
Councillor Sturt, you had a question?
One point of clarification. Phase 3, Una, where the public has the right to make an objection or appeal during this period before the proposal is sent to the local government, those appeals can only be made by the 52 people who have made objection. Is that correct or not? Has that changed?
No, anybody can,
okay.
yes.
All right, thank you.
It is important we get these questions right. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I'd like to ask where the reduction in councillor numbers are actually originated from. Because when the working party reported back to this council after initial consultations with members of the public, there was absolutely no mention of it. And I'm starting to wonder as to why a reduction in councillors has even come about. And perhaps someone could answer that for me first?
Should come through Una.
So you will remember we had, I think it was a workshop we started with, and in that workshop the working party were looking at a mixed system, and at that point in time there wasn't a consideration to looking at the numbers. Then when the working party took that information and had to then start applying the legal requirements around the plus or minus 10% rule, which then comes down to how many people get represented by a councillor, that proposal of our mixed system didn't work. So that's when the working party then looked at, well, how can we still get a voice for the lakes and the rural? And that's when it came about that let's retain an at-large system and 2 community boards. Then there were the discussions around the representation of that, having and based with their suggestions and considerations to, have more powers at the community board level and have the community board members sitting at the table. There was that balance around then the voices at the table. And we did some modelling around sort of looking at overall, do we retain, which includes community boards and elected members, looking at trying to retain a sort of the same numbers overall in terms of representation, and that's how the 10 came about.
Through you, Your Worship, then if I get this correctly, it's just the working party's discussion that has suggested that we should drop 2 councillors.
That's correct. And then from that, you approved that proposal to go out for consultation. That's what the community have provided response on.
Thank you.
My second question
Sorry.
relates to if the decision with respect to inclusion of Hamarana in the Lakes Community Board or not cannot be made until after the next election. How can you make a decision that says that Hamarana, part of Hamarana, would be included in a rural community board now, and the other part wouldn't? Because surely everyone who's in Hamarana would be entitled to be part of the rural community board until such time as you came up with the definition of the so-called Lakes Community Board Hamarana area.
I did hear that slightly differently as an answer from Una before, but would you like to clarify that, Una, just so that we're all clear?
When you make your decision tonight, you are making a decision on the structure of the community boards and the areas that the community boards cover and represent. And so that is defined, and there is that clear split between the properties directly associated with the lakes at Hamarana being lakes and being in the Lakes Community Board area versus all the other rural properties that are Hamarana above. So, you know, all that Kaharoa areas further up Tauranga Direct Road would be represented by the Rural Community Board. And you decide on that today, the structure of that.
But please, can we just clarify this? Are you saying that we are determining whether Hamarana would be included in the Lakes Community Board tonight or not?
I have a question if I'd like to ask it. There was great interest in the fed farmers submission, and yet in our presentation tonight, the feedback that came back said 37 yes for a rural board and 15 no, so virtually 2 to 1. That was a bit of a mixed model, and my question is, can you have that sort of reserved seat, which was what they were really asking for, on those councillors elected at large?
The proposal that was put forward by the fed farmers does work. It works when you bring in the plus minus 10%, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't meet the objectives that the Working Party put forward to you and they used to base their proposal on. Correct.
Fairness and voting for as many councillors as possible.
Yes. So if you were if you lived and reside in the rural community, going forward under that system, under a ward system, you will get 1 vote for your rural ward representative and then 2 at large. So if you lived in the rural community, you would only get a maximum of 3 votes, as opposed to being in the urban lakes ward, you would get the 9, because under their proposal it's
Yes, Jeff?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to go back, Councillor Kent. I think your question may have been answered perhaps in a slightly misleading way, I'm sorry, in that I understood what you were asking was that would the changes that are taking, or you're deciding on tonight, take place immediately? And the answer is no. All of these changes will only happen after the election.
Can I jump in? Yes, Jeff is correct. So what you are deciding upon today is what then becomes the model following the 2016 elections. So it would come into effect, and so people running and the campaigning and that would be done under this model. It wouldn't come in effect as of January. It would come in effect October 2016.
So the shape of next election is what we're voting tonight. Thank you. Thank you. So we're quite clear on that. Other questions, Councillor Gould? And then back.
Madam Chair, point of clarification from the Chair, the Mayor of Rotorua and the Chief Executive. Question, will councillors' comments tonight, 12th of November, be recorded? If an appeal is lodged, then the local government commission will need to know the views of the councillors present with the comments tonight. So they need to be lodged in some form of minutes to be kept.
Councillor Gould, we do record our full council meetings.
When we get the minutes back, Madam Chair, it doesn't cover much when we approve them the following meeting.
Could you?
So Councillor, effectively the way the minutes work is that if you support a recommendation as is actually being presented, then the rationale for that recommendation is contained in the staff report. And in this case, it is actually the deliberations of the working group. If, on the other hand, you change the recommendation and move to a completely different or a variant of what has been recommended, then in that case you will have to clearly articulate the reasons for your change and why you've made a different decision. So in other words, the minutes will reflect the decision making. So if you actually make a decision to support the recommendations, there is no need for detailed councillor comment on that because the rationale is already contained in the report.
Yeah, as a member of the working party, we're only on questions. No, I'll wait. I'll debate later then.
Yep. Councillor Sereng.
Madam Chair, in regard to the proposal put forward by Federated Farmers, the boundary for the community board, that would form the same boundary if it was a rural ward. Is that correct? In other words, you would be able to use exactly the same mesh blocks for a rural ward as you have proposed for a rural community board.
I believe so, yes.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Bentley. I've overlooked you. Councillor Bentley. And
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we're just being a little bit hasty here in that the first time I heard of the rural proposal put forward by Federated Farmers, which I thought was pretty good, but we haven't as a council really had much of a chance to sit down around the table and have it nutted out properly. And I think that to end up making a decision tonight without having that informal get-together is perhaps putting the cart before the horse a wee bit, because there's certainly many merits in the good morning.
Chair, thank you. So your question, Councillor Bentley, is that should we consider more time? Una, could you answer that, please?
We have to have put a public notice in the paper with the decision on what this council has decided its representation model to be by the 19th of November.
So in other words, we don't have the time, even though we were all intrigued by the submission, but we can ask more questions around it if other councillors have questions. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got two questions which seem to be at direct conflict with each other. The first one is the Working Party established a set of objectives that guided the development towards the initial proposal, very clearly stating the ability to elect as many councillors as possible. So how are you reducing councillor numbers and complying with that objective? Surely that is complete oxymoron.
That was a recommendation the Working Party brought to us and we adopted. So that was the time for us to challenge that, which would not be tonight.
Madam Chair, may I just
Yes.
also say that certainly came about too by particularly people in the Lakes community just wanting to make sure that their numbers would not be, the ability to elect as many councillors wouldn't be reduced as well. So, you know, there was a concern there. So yes, Certainly this is not something that the working party decided would be a great thing, reduction of numbers. I think the portfolios and the way the engagement strategy is being developed had a big impact on the community, as we saw when the final submissions came in when it went out for public consultation.
Through you, Your Worship, I think, Councillor Kent, if I've got this right, that the assumption you are drawing is that the principle was to have as many councillors as possible, and that was not the principle that was actually articulated. The articulation, I believe, is actually about people being able to express their view as to the councillors that would be elected for as many councillors who are elected as possible, not to have as many councillors as possible.
Well, I've got a problem there because this went out to public consultation, and it very specifically states in there the objectives are to elect as many councillors as possible, and that's in conflict. So we were misleading the public in our consultation.
Madam Chair,
sorry, would you
Madam
like
Chair.
to answer that, JP?
Your Worship, I think what Una has said, and it really becomes the sort of the cornerstone of the issue as to why she identified a cross against the fairness in the number of elected representatives, was that if I was a large farm holder in Waikiki, or a lifestyle block holder in Waikiki, so you're in the same rural area of the district, you would fall within that rural ward area. So what has been proposed on the table for you today is that if I lived in that particular area, I'd be able to elect 10 councillors or vote for 10 councillors and a mayor, plus 4 members of a community board to represent me. So that would be my sum total of the votes. What was promoted or put forward in the submission by Federated Farmers to Council was that I would be able to vote for 1 rural ward councillor for the rural ward and 2 at-large councillors plus the mayor. And that would be my voting ability. So I would be able to vote for 4. So I think that's the reason why it was this view of the number of councillors that could be elected, and that was the differentiation the Chief Executive made to you.
But, excuse me, Your Worship, I still have an issue here. Because one of the main things that was actually stated to this council in terms of gaining our agreement to go out with that proposal was that the reduction in councillors was to help pay for a rural community board. And that was very clearly stated. Now we have an issue here that Federated Farmers have come out and told us, and I quote here on page 42, Mr. Heather commented that not one person they've spoken to is interested in the community board. So why are we still pursuing a reduction in councillors?
Madam.
Yeah, we're debating rather than asking questions. I think my question would be, and great submission, but as Federated Farmers, the voice of the entire rural community? Before we go to debate, could I signal here that I want to add an amendment to 2? Well, I'll move and amend. Well, that's what I'm signalling. I can do it now. I move and amended 2. And Una, if you put up the recommendations going forward, Rick, if you can go back to the screen in your choice, where you had those recommendations for consideration by an incoming council. There's 2 there that I think if we put in this resolution, go further forward. No, further. Where did I see it? Right. The last 2 dot points, I want to move that the future consideration dot point, the last 2, reassess the delegation of and the powers of the community boards in order for the community board to be truly effective, to consider budget allocation that they would administer and be accountable for, and that the chair of each community board has delegation to vote on council committees be included in what we're voting tonight. Yes. Or we could put it in 2 and we could put it the following 2 dot points at the bottom. You want to do it as 3? Yeah.
As Una stated, these items with the points that are up there now are outside the gambit and the responsibility of this Your Choice Committee.
That's right.
But they can be recommendations to the incoming council that's what we do with the delegations.
So point 3, you're quite right. So I move that amendment. You second it. Thank you, Councillor Sturt.
Point of order, Your Worship.
We'll have to get time to get that just recorded if we could.
Right. Point of order, surely you can't actually make that assessment because you are determining the composition of the boards to come in. It is up for the new council to determine those items that you've just added.
To the incoming council.
That's right.
Under 3.
Under 3. New point 3. We're just doing it now. We're just doing it now, and then we all need to just pause while Rick can get that. That's it. And number 3. Yeah. That's right. That's right. That's right. You can only do that, really, can't you, Councillor Thring? Pardon? Are you still taking questions? Yes. Yeah. Yes, yes. I just signalled this.
So the question I have, I think those worthy number 3, giving them more, effect to our community boards. So is that a la similar to the Te Arawa committee? It is instead of council committees, it's council standing committees.
But it is not. Yeah, the council committees. Well, it is. We said on council committee.
Yeah. It's just that what we've got with Te Arawa is to the 2 standing committees. But that.
Or they are the 2 committees of council. Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah, that's what I have standing committees. So it's clear.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, I just wanted to raise a point of clarification in response to Councillor Maxwell's point, is that it will be up to the next mayor to determine the committee structure. So we can't confuse this with the Te Arawa's proposal, because that will come into effect during this term. So I think what's up there is right. It's getting right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was meant.
Thank you.
The incoming people might have 4 standing committees.
Are there further questions? Councillor Waipa.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just with regard to what you've put up as number 3, so you can't put an assumption in there, but I guess what I'm trying to find out is, would that same criteria apply that we have got with the Te Arawa partnership model, that would we be we're actually saying the chair as of right, we're suggesting that rather than we evaluate the person they're nominating? It's quite different, isn't it?
The powers of an incoming council, the powers of the mayor, are to determine the committees and the makeup of the committees. This is only a recommendation to be carried forward to a new council.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just trying to look for fairness about. But I'm also confusing the 2 with what we're doing now and what we might do next time, depending on who's here. So that's why. I do wish to take up, Madam Chair, just Councillor Bentley's point that I understand the time frame. We've only got a few days left to be able to have to publicise this, which is rather a pity, because some of us might have felt that we would have liked to have perhaps had the opportunity to examine the Federated Farmers' proposal, because they did say that most people would be happy with only 3. So my question is, I know it's too late, but could I just be reminded again from someone from the panel, Councillor Sturt or Rotorua Tate, how many rural communities did you actually go and consult with? And that community board recommendation. I know you've given it to us before, but you can just remind me, because we're saying, well, federated farmers just represent some, but you had this more of a feedback from everyone else, so I just want to check that thing.
We did have a number of meetings with individual people, but federated farmers on more than one occasion said no thank you, they did not want to meet with us. Yeah, so at the last minute they did.
You met with rural community groups?
Yes.
Not represent the whole rural community, because the rural community, you have a look at Mamaku. Mamaku's made up of urban and rural people, but it is rural. So, you know, I think the most indicative thing is the 52 that made the submissions and the synopsis of where their views stood.
Good point.
Clarification, Your Worship. You talked before about this recommendation for the next council in October 2016, but on your screen at the moment you've got number 2, that the council adopt representation arrangements for the 2016 and 2019 elections that consist of. You'd be better taking out 2016 and just leaving 2019 there.
No, you've got to have that.
No, it's very specific that we are voting tonight for the shape of what will go before the community next year when they elect council. 2016 and 19, because you only get a chance to do this every 6 years. It's Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Can I ask the Chief Executive for his assessment of the likelihood of this decision being appealed and what the impact would be, please?
We don't know really. How could we? That is the right of anybody in the community.
But am I right in thinking one single person appealing totally overturns this decision and puts it fairly and squarely in case with the authority that's going to make the decision?
The authority is the Local Government Commission, yes, and they make a considered decision based on the balance of the submissions and the process. Is that right?
Your Worship, that is certainly what, and Una detailed that to you previously. So it's not a case of simply looking at the objection. It's a case of looking back at what has been proposed, what consultation was undertaken, what initial feedback, and obviously a factor in that is what the working party originally brought to council as in the workshop, which also included discussions at the ward level, which of course council fed back to say, well, actually that doesn't provide the community with enough votes for individual councillors. That was one of the feedback points that was made. Not to mention the submissions, the videos of the hearings and all the submission points. So a single objector, yes, it will kick off a process with the Local Government Commission, but the Local Government Commission will look at all of the information and all of the process that's been undertaken before they make a decision. That was certainly what happened approximately 6 years ago, and that's resulted, based on an objection from the Lakes community, in the formation of the Lakes Community Board.
About as a recommendation from the Commission after their review. Councillor Maxwell.
Questions are over. Yeah, we can speak open for...
No more questions.
Okay.
So I'll open for discussion.
Right. I'd like to... thank you, Worship. I'd like to speak in support of recommendations 2 and 3 that's there now, and also thank the working party because with what Una's put up there, I'm very pleased seeing just how thorough they went out to the community. Between April and July, some 530 people approached. And I think with what we received at the hearings, I think it reflected the work that they did do. I expected a lot more submissions, but there weren't. And so for me, I think extensive community engagement has been taken on board and considered by that group. And yeah, thank the working party that's been there. Now, for someone who's been on this council, and we had 26 councillors around here, then it went down to 16, then it went down to 12, and now down to 10. I think that's a natural pathway for our community. I'm also mindful of the fact that all the submitters who put in, out in the rural area, they're not all farmers, as was pointed out, I think, Mamaku and some of the other places and that. And it said that something came up about maybe more time to look at it. Personally, no, I am very pleased with the working party's work that they've done for us now with the people from the community that were on there as well. So we chose the working party, they've done their work, and I'm supportive of the recommendations that's gone forward.
Yes, Councillor McVicker.
I've been listening to the debate this evening, and firstly, I would just like to register the point that I don't believe necessarily that the view of the working party with the numbers of 10 should necessarily make that decision. It is our call tonight. I won't be supporting the recommendation of 10. But furthermore, I believe when people come along and make a verbal submission on behalf of members, for example, the Federated Farmers Group, I don't know how many members or supporters they would have had, but would have been quite substantial. And I really got a clear message from Federated Farmers and Mr. Heather, who I see is here tonight, that the rural community that they represent does not want a community board. That came through loud and clear. Poor second best was one comment. And they clearly have indicated they want representation around the council table. So I would urge, as Councillor Bentley mentioned earlier on, that we do give more consideration to their recommendation, which they indicated they spent a lot of time and effort to come up with that formula. And I'm pleased to hear it is working. It can work if we do it right. So I'm not comfortable with where we're heading at with this recommendation at this point of time. Firstly, 10 or 12, but more importantly, you know, we're neglecting the message we have received from that rural sector, and we should be endeavouring to improve our relationship with them, not do the opposite. So I have some concerns if we proceed with the current recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Kent. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stewart, will be next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too have got misgivings. My first misgiving is with the reduction in councillors. The reason for that is quite simple, and for exactly the same reason that they have 12 on a jury. It is so that you have a mix of opinions and a mix of ideas and a mix of skills to actually come up with the best results for the district. The more you can find that number, the more you are limiting that mix. I don't personally agree with the reduction to 10. I think we should remain with the status quo at 12. I'm in favour of the rural community gaining a greater voice, and in fact I'm in favour of the community actually having a greater voice, because as I've said loudly and clearly, this council doesn't listen to the community nearly enough. The rural community does need a greater voice. I don't think we've got the right way of going about it here at all. We've got federated farmers on one side telling us loudly and clearly no one that they've spoken to remotely wants a community board. We've got the issue of a community of interest spread over the entire district, which is highly likely to be knocked back by the local government under commission, under any form of appeal, because it is not a community of interest, because it is so diverse. We've got an issue of Hamarana being included in the Lakes Board. Well, I actually don't recollect any, I may have missed them, but I don't think I even saw a single submission from anyone in Hamarana saying they wanted to join the Lakes Community Board. So I'm wondering if we've actually got this right. My belief is, no, we haven't got it right, and that we should take some time out, as has been suggested, and perhaps just get round the table and look a little bit more closely at what federated farmers have suggested, because I think there's very good merit there. And I think it deserves more debate rather than just landing the next council with what we've decided, perhaps prematurely.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I can't support that viewpoint whatsoever. I'll be strongly supporting the recommendations as we've got up there. We had a call from the rural community that they believed there was a disconnect with this council. Years ago, they supported the at-large and against the ward system. I sat here and listened to the submissions. Federated Farmers came and said we wanted an at-large system, and they got an at-large system. What we considered when we were on the working party was, in going around and talking to people, was the cross-section from the whole community. And one of the things I sort of thought of, well, we want a more effective and good governance model that will stand the test of time, including the rural community. So by reducing the councillors down to 10, it gave the opportunity that we could put our hand up and say there would be no extra cost to the ratepayer, because you've got a rural community board with 4, and a Lakes community board with 4, and with the portfolios, the reason why we reduced it to 10 was that the portfolios will become stronger and stronger and more effective, and the community will be able to engage with those portfolio leaders and deputy leaders, which has to be strengthened in the next term. The deputies have to support the chairs so that they can come back through the 2-committee system that we've currently got and report things back. So I think the portfolio groups will lend more of it, but I don't think anything's lost, because you've got a council which will now have committees comprising 10 elected councillors, 2 Te Arawa elected representatives from the Te Arawa people, 1 from the community board, rural, and 1 from the community board, Lakes. So you're now going to have 14 on the committees, where at the moment we've only got 12. And one of those is going to be a specialist Lakes and a specialist rural person. And that has been that's one of the reasons why I've always been averse to the community boards, because they've had no power. They have, to be honest with you, we've paid lip service to their advice in certain areas. They've actually had to go out and do the things themselves and raise funds themselves to do their own community projects. So I really believe the proposal up there is a better mix in terms of getting the right people at the table. The other point that you raised, Councillor Kent, that you believed we're running at haste, the rest of our community haven't had the opportunity to consider the Federated Farmers' proposal to reduce their voting down to 7 either. So at the down to 7 with 3, we have got 10, 2 for rural ward, and 1 for rural only. So that would take your urban councillors down to 7 in a 10 mix, plus 1 mayor. So the rest of our community hasn't had the opportunity to discuss that either. But we thought we were getting on the working party a strong guide from the rural community that they wanted a rural community board. And look at the submissions. Yes, Federated Farmers were against it and came up with an alternative. They'd be to be congratulated by that. But there were other rural people who made submissions who said they supported the community board. So I mean, we're betwixt or between. But rest assured, Councillor Kent, that the 6 people that were on that working party worked their butts off. The 3 from the community did it for absolutely nothing, consulted in the freezing cold at night markets, down at the Kurau Park Market, knocked on doors, did surveys of parks, etc., and worked very hard to find out what the community's views were. So I applaud you. I mean, this may very well be overturned and appealed. But at the end of the day, the working party has done the job it was charged with. It came back to this council on numerous occasions with where it was heading, got approval from this council, and we moved forward. And under the guidance of Una and JP and the team and Rick, we took it forward. And we believe we've had a very, very robust communication with our... We're not going to please everybody. We never will. And we never have in the past. But I believe that is a fair and effective way of representation in our community, better than what it has been anyway.
Councillor Rotorua.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I have no problem in supporting these recommendations 2 and 3. I didn't realise, first of all, the extent of the work involved in this piece of work by councillors and by members of our community. The community people on the working group, but it was, I have to say, probably one of the most enjoyable pieces of work that I've been involved with since I've been on this council. There was the opportunity for the community to look at how we could work differently, and that is what came through. They certainly wanted the right to ensure that they could vote between 6 to 30 people. Whatever that number might be, they wanted to be reassured that they would have that right. They made it very clear to us that they like the way that the portfolios now are allowing them to engage more with council through the portfolios, and so they saw it as an opportunity to have some change, and that change was not about councillors wanting to retain the status quo. They were very, very clear. We had wonderful people who were thinking people, who said that we can get ourselves together, we can come and do projects at any time that concern us in our small community and our environment, and this is an opportunity for us to do that. So it was a way of working differently, and the community were going to take it up. And our report and the recommendations here reflect very much what came through the consultations with our community. So I'm very happy to support this tonight.
Hunt?
I'm going to speak in support of it. The Local Government Commission have already, when they were asked, granted us a community board that covers a very wide area. And I don't really see any difference with them considering the geographical area of the Rural Community Board. I do acknowledge the huge input that Federated Farmers and that group put into their alternative model, because I know that's not, it would have taken a large number of hours for them to do that, and they did in order to seek better representation, so I do acknowledge that. However, they've reduced the possibility of voting for everyone, and for many people that's a key issue. The other concern I have is that there was, on questioning, and it was only 2, but there seemed very little awareness of what the Lakes Community Board currently does and how it works. And I think that I would like to have seen some exploration of whether that model fitted, not just an assumption that it didn't. And if this goes through, as I believe it will tonight, then in 6 years' time, when the current council of the day is sitting here looking at representation review, then the rural sector can decide whether it has or hasn't met their needs and what changes they need then. So I'm going to support it in the current format. That's 1, 2 and 3 up there.
Anybody? Councillor Sereng?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have to speak against it as well. I'm not opposed to 10 councillors and 1 mayor, but I am opposed to the way that we propose that they be elected. I think the Federated Farmers submission to me is very, very fair indeed. So I took the opportunity this week of ringing 10 rural residents just to get an idea from them of how they felt about it. None of them had anything to do much with the whole process that we have been through. All 10 of them said they would be very happy voting for 3 people, because normally they only vote for 3 or 4 when they are confronted with 30-odd names for the council elections. They know very, very few of them, because there's hardly a rural person amongst them. As we know, they're all urban people. So they say, that a lot of them said in different words, that they would never vote for more than 3 or 4, and they would see the fact that the rural ward person would be present at the table and get the vote. They see that, and they weren't all farming people. 4 of them were lifestyle blocks. I just find it is so fair. I really do. 7 urban councillors, 2 at large, and 1 rural ward. Now, I give you the example of Tauranga. They have 10 councillors. They have very little rural land, so the subject of a rural voice doesn't really come into it, but they have 3 wards. They have 2 of 2 people in that ward. They have 1 ward with 3 people in it, and they have 3 at large. So everybody votes at the most that you vote for are 6 of your 10 councillors, and in the 2 wards that have 2 councillors, you vote for 5. It works very well, and I don't think there's any move in Tauranga to change that. So I know, and Councillor Sturt, I must correct you, the rural people, when we went to the ward system, were vehement that they wanted to stay with the wards. They were not happy with an at-large system. So they were. I voted for an at-large system, and I regret that I voted wrongly, and I will say that. I don't believe we should have disbanded the wards, but that's history. That's history. You can't do anything about that. So I really do think we nearly. I know we're short of time, and that's the whole problem. We have to have this out by the 19th. So we have to make a decision tonight, and it's an important decision because it counts for the next 2 elections. But I'm not unhappy with 10. I believe we could function with 10, but I am unhappy with the way that they would be elected without taking into account that rural voice that we do need at this table.
Are there anybody else that wishes to? Oh, well, I'd like to say. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gould, you didn't indicate before.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be voting against this because I feel I acknowledge the services which the 6 people have done with going out to the community, getting their views and everything like that. But I acknowledge that the submitters who made a verbal submission made it on the 3rd of November. We had an opportunity from the 3rd of November until now to use one of our spare days to discuss this matter further, because a number of us councillors have got questions, and it would have been better to sort out the problems before tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting may be rushed, but the decision will not be unanimous. It'll go down to a vote, whatever it does. The Tauranga system does work, so I can't see why Rotorua can't have some ward councillors and some councillors elected at large. The rural community have stated through their Federated Farmers submission that they want ward councillors. You know, we should listen to them. They pay 24% of the rates, the rural rates come from the rural sector to pay for the Rotorua Lakes Council with the rate take of $77 million. So they do make a large contribution to this council. They don't use all the services. They put up with all the rate increases in previous years till this year, where it was too much for a number of their farmers, which they made submissions about. And I believe that we should listen to them and give them an opportunity of having ward councillors.
Councillor Gould, Councillor Bentley.
I think Mark is reading my notes, so it's all done.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Look, I'll just be very quick. I acknowledge the Federated Farmers submission. It was extremely interesting, but I also am aware that the rural rohi of our district is quite diverse, and when I think of Riparoa, Kaingaroa, Mamaku and the lifestylers, it's a lot wider than just the membership of federated farmers. So I have to trust the process and the process engaged on by the working party, and I look at how the numbers fell, and Rural Community Board 37-15 for Lakes Community Board 38-14 to retain that, and 10 councillors, and that's the way I'm going to vote. I'll support the recommendation.
Councillor Waipa.
Thank
Your choice, there was a slide Councillor Maxwell's asking for on the voting, on the submission process feedback. And while that's being found, Councillor Waipa.
Thank you. Just briefly, Your Worship, I'll support this tonight. I don't think it's perfect, but unfortunately we never get a perfect solution to everything. And certainly when you hear all the submitters, you realise that there is a range that does reflect perhaps some of our views around the table. But the reason I'm supporting it tonight is that I think we've left it too late to go back and look at perhaps a model that Councillor Sarank is suggesting at this stage, looking at Tauranga. We did decide some time ago to get our election review panel, and I think that was actually a really good process, and I think we have had a thorough process. The reason why at this point I'm not going to support the idea of a rural ward is purely and simply because on page 44 it does outline that there is no guarantee that in that system that a rural person would actually be elected. There's actually not a guarantee, and we found that before, that's happened when we were in the wards. There is a guarantee that you will have that rural representation with a community board. And so I think that's the difference for me, because when we did stand in the wards, which I did always continue to support, the reality was that sometimes it was felt that they didn't actually have someone there that was from their area. So you can go anywhere to stand. So for those reasons, I will support this, and we'll see how it goes over the next 6 years. Thank you.
And I just wish to speak in that I support a process of consultation. And we were a community, we were a council that clearly indicated that we had lost our way with engagement with the rural sector. And I believe that the Lakes Board and their effectiveness in working for councillors demonstrated the benefits of having a community board. And once I held the view that I wasn't even sure that we needed more layers of local government, but I've enjoyed the Lakes Board. And if we give the powers that we are recommending carrying forward to a new council to consider, of having one of those board members at the table, at the council committee, I think it would make it far more attractive for those to stand for a rural board, because they can see they won't be in another room with the door shut, that they will be sitting at the two committees of council, or however many committees there will be in an incoming council. So that gives much more inclusiveness at the participation level, which is what we as a council have always said in this term we want: increased participation and increased engagement. I think the Working Party have done a very good job here, a very thorough job, and the depth of submissions back reflected that. And I also enjoyed the Federated Farmers submission, but I have to say, to your suggestion, Councillor Gould, not one councillor asked for a meeting to consider just the Federated Farmers submission, or any other submission for that matter, and we had time. We heard it earlier in the month. So we're saying tonight at the 11th hour that it was laudable and that we... No. Order, Councillor Gould, that's not a point of order at all. If you request something, it will be considered. You don't speak to the Chief Executive, you request a meeting to consider, and then it's for us to consider. Continue speaking. And I think that the work has been very considered. I've been at each workshop where we've had the feedback, and the feedback is the process for us to then say, have we got it right? Have we considered those voices that we want to engage with this council in an improved model? And that was the time at the workshops. The workshops were great when we had feedback. We actually had all members of the working party come to us. That was the time for us to challenge, to get a better mix and to take that out as part of the consultation. But we went along with the numbers that came back to us as a recommendation, and then they went out for consultation. In my view, that's consultation. I certainly think that the consultation and the mix of that group, that working party, reflected, it was great having some community members on the working party who worked incredibly hard going out at many, many occasions that we as councillors weren't aware of, to go on and talk and engage with our community. I do think it's a pity, actually, and I know that Fed Farmers worked on that submission. What a pity it wasn't part of earlier working party processes, because it was very laudable submission to come before us. So I will be supporting the recommendations tonight, particularly with the strengthening of recommendation 3, when the community sees that this council it's voting for this is looking at giving increased powers and delegation to both those community boards. I think they'll be well sought after to be part of the next council elections. So I will be voting in support. There appear to be no other speakers. I'm going to put the recommendation 2 and 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary?
No.
Division? Division called for. All those in favour, please say aye. I'll raise your right arm. Thank you, Councillor 3. It went up automatically. Against?
So, councillors, those voting for were Mayor Chadwick, Donaldson, Hunt, Maxwell, Rotorua Tate, Sturt, Tapsell and Waipa. Those voting against were Bentley, Gould, Kent, McVicker and Councillor Sarank. So the motion is carried.
Thank you, and thank you to those of the public and the community boards and Fed Farmers and the Working Party who are here tonight to hear that item for resolution tonight. Move on now to item 8.2, page 56. And we're now moving on to the local alcohol policy. Do I have a mover?
I'll move recommendation 2, Madam Chair, page 56, number 1.
Okay. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Donaldson, put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Nevin, do you wish to present the report and overview it?
Thank you, Your Worship, and evening, councillors. So you'll recall that in July this year you approved the provisional local alcohol policy. Shortly after that, it became apparent that some more appeals were dealt with by the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority in Wellington, which put the policy that you agreed at risk of being quite clearly appealed. And that was around the differentiation of the hours we had, particularly around off licences, where we had said in the inner city we had one set of hours, in the suburban areas we had another set of hours for off licences, and then we gave some exemptions to the supermarkets. And those appeals quite clearly dealt with those issues, saying that there was an uneven playing field in those areas that had similar policies to that, and they were referred back to those councils to resolve that issue, to give a fair playing field to all those in off-licence fields. And that means that whether you be a small grocery store that has a off-licence, or a full-blown bottle store, or you were a supermarket, you had the same hours and days of operation. So while that was there, we took the opportunity to have a look at that and make the recommendations that we remove those exemptions for supermarkets and we put all off-licences on a level playing field. That gave us an opportunity to also address a couple of wording issues that were brought to our attention by Hospitality New Zealand. The second one was around our one-way door policy, and it was an unintentional wording. So whilst we knew what we were wanting to say in the policy, when the Hospitality Association looked at the wording, it was ambiguous, and it could mean that we were requiring restaurants to have a one-way door policy, which was clearly not what council intended. So we took that opportunity to reword that and give it as a discretionary item back to your district licensing committee, that in their opinion, when they were dealing with a licence application, if it was appropriate for them to put a one-way door policy in their licence, they would do so. So that was more around our nightclubs in the inner city. The third thing that we did was you approved the principles of SIPTED for off-licences in particular. So we took the opportunity with the new brochure that came out and guidelines presented by Health Protection Authority, which was formerly ALAC, where they strengthened those guidelines for premises. So we took those and we put them into your policy, and those are the three changes that we have for you tonight.
Questions, Councillor Kent? It was a long time ago, really. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question with regard to the wording of the revision that's on page 110. Because if you actually read the statement there, off-licences will need to demonstrate good visibility to and from their premises and the street, including the percentage of clear windows in the front of their premises. That could be complied with a sign saying 0 stuck on an absolutely blanked out window, and we could do nothing about it. So it's actually not phrased well.
Would you like to clarify that, Councillor Hunt?
The SIPTED guidelines specify a certain percentage of clear glass as a guideline. So this policy, we are asking those making an application to let us know how much they have already. So when they put their application for renewal or a new licence, we're asking them to describe exactly what they have in relation to those guidelines. Then the committee can decide, as opposed to it being a percentage that they either meet or fail, the committee can decide on that specific application whether the committee feels it meets, in general, the SIPTED guidelines, because they are merely guidelines, they're not absolutes. So that is why that is worded. If someone would like to wordsmith that to make it clearer, then obviously that's what we're here to do today, to look at those before it gets sent out. But that in essence, there is a booklet which we are going to be giving out to all renewals and new off-licences and applications as they come in, so that they are very aware, because amenity and good order is something that we know is high on our community's wish list, so that many of these suburban off-licences are not as attractive, nor are they as safe as they could be. And many of those that have issues, a lot of those issues are due to the fact of poor SIPTED principles. So poor visibility when you enter the store and poor visibility from within the store. So that is what that policy is set to address.
Thank you. Councillor Rokauta.
Yes, thank you. Just want to ask, Niven, if you could just clarify something to me. The one-way door policy, or the one-way door restriction, does that apply to clubs?
it can apply to clubs if the District Licensing Committee deems an appropriate licence condition on their premise. Generally, we've worked with the inner city in the last 5 years to get them all on a one page around that, especially when they were all opening till 3 a.m. So we were working with them on a trial for 2 a.m, being that 1 hour for that. When we went out for consultation, we took the policy back to 1 a.m. to see what the response would be from the industry and the community, and it was a clear signal. That was the biggest submission point for the whole policy, was that was too restrictive for the premises. So yes, clubs can have that as a discretionary item on their licence.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Then Councillor Kent and Councillor Waipa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. I had a case today where a small club had to pay $264 for putting an advert in the paper to respond, as per your requirements.
Councillor Gould, this is around our proposed alcohol policy.
It is to do with the alcohol policy. It's about the advert going in the paper. I just want to know that the Rotorua Lakes Council get a better rate. Could they put the advert in on their behalf and reduce that particular cost?
Accepting that is outside, the cost of advertising is outside of our policy. We're looking at our policy. Councillor Sturt?
The working party that's looked at this local alcohol policy consists of a whole wide range of stakeholders. Like the previous debate, this group was appointed to undertake a specific role. They've been through the mantra, they've been through all the ups and downs, the appeals, the law in terms of its interpretation. I haven't been involved in any of that. I've certainly been kept informed, like the previous debate, you were kept informed. But in terms of the mechanics of the law, I think we've got to be guided by that working party. And
Councillor Sturt, we are not rewriting or relitigating this. This has come to us from those experts in the working party for us tonight to endorse. Unless, as Councillor Kent, sort of couldn't understand, well, I'm not saying you couldn't understand the reading, but the clarity of the reading, that's quite constructive, but it's not for us to change and debate.
Correct.
Councillor Kent.
Yes, Your Worship. I can recommend a very small wording change that would actually resolve the issue on page 110 that perhaps those that are making the decisions may like to consider. And that just change it to read, will need to demonstrate good visibility to and from their premises and the street, and demonstrate an acceptable percentage of clear windows in the front of their premises. That then is unambiguous.
Did you get that, Rick? Nevin, have you got that? It's really about actually the readership have to get it. So the licence application has to get it. Yep. How does that read to you?
Yes, and then that again is back to the District Licensing Committee to make that determination which is acceptable or not.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Rotorua.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to, it quite pains me actually to say so, because I belong to 3 clubs in this city.
Goodness me.
Yes, and then other establishments too, I can assure you. But it pains me because I hear so often from either the managers or the bar owners that they believe that our policies are not always handled even-handed. The approach, even-handed. The approach isn't even-handed, and it comes up so often. And so I just hope that that our officers do listen with a willingness to understand, and that they also apply our policies around this and our new plan with an even-handed approach, because that does concern me, and it comes up so often.
Dave, would you like to respond? that you're the officer. Do you accept that assumption?
I think it's always anything in a court of law, which the District Licensing Committee is taken on the merits of the case as it is presented. And we have cases appearing before the District Licensing Committee, and depending how they argue their side of the case depends on the decision. On the outside looking in, for some people, they may see that as being inconsistent with the way they have dealt with it. Others don't want to go through a hearing process, so they are guided by our partner agency, being the police and the medical officer health, and there's some horse trading, if you like, behind the scenes before the application comes before the District Licensing Committee. But I think it's fair to say that my staff, we work to a template system which is set by ALA, and they have to report on the same points consistently for each application. So where there is a recommendation that the licence either be opposed or not renewed in the format that it is the gambit of the District Licensing Committee to have that hearing and listen to both sides of that argument and make their decision.
Thank you, Nevin. That's actually an operational issue that is not substantive policy that we're debating tonight. Councillor Waipa?
I just wanted to say that the working party was actually made up of councillors who were interested in this, and 4 or 5 of us, I think, who got together and went through this at length with Nevin and Councillor Hunt, who of course is part of that group. We have the liquor licensing group. So it is time for us to sort of, and I have to say I'm a little disappointed that I think it's been watered down a wee bit. I understand why when you see the potential for appeals. So it is a lot weaker, in my opinion, when we listen to the community and what they said. So I guess my only question of Nevin, and I won't go on at length, it's getting late, but is when you see that, and I see how they've managed to say, you know, people in the outer areas say they want the same standard in terms of longer hours to be the same as in town. But the reality is that their environment is not always very pleasant, and it's darker, and it can be more of a nuisance. And the community came in very strongly and opposed that. And we're suggesting that we don't. So is the only way that the community, if they don't like something that's happening in their neighbourhood or very close to them, is that when it comes up for renewal, they could complain and it could be taken away, that renewal. That's the only way that the community will have a voice now, because if we're not going to reduce those opening hours, that's really all we're saying, isn't it? Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair. There's several points in the new legislation that give some guidance. For the first time, councils have been able to consider what's called the amenity and good order value of the area that's affected by the licence. You may recall in our operations and monitoring report back to council that there was an off-licence applied for here in Arawa Street. That was turned down solely on the amenity and good order value of the premise and the objections received from the areas, from some of the premises in that area. So there's a stronger ability for the community to have their say. The hours in this, yes, we have had to do a bit of trading around that, but the off-licence hours in the Act, the default for the whole of New Zealand is 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Through your policy, you're bringing that back to 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., but that does not mean that all licences will get that, those hours while they apply. So recently the District Licensing Committee has made 2 decisions where the hours were brought back because of the issues that you raise. So the committee is listening to the community, and this is just a policy saying this is where the guidance is, so that there can be seen that. But if the people are not behaving well and there are concerns, then the committee will make an appropriate decision once they've heard all sides of the story.
Thank you, Nevin. I'm just very aware it's 9:15 and we've still got quite substantive items on the agenda, and these are sort of extraneous issues around the policy that's been brought to us tonight. I'm going to call for a mover and a seconder unless someone has a burning point of clarification. Thank you. Moved, Councillor Sarank. Second, Councillor McVicker. Right. Does anyone wish to debate? Councillor Gould.
Page 113, Madam Chair. You've got events up to 2 hours duration, minimum of snack food, you've got minimum of light food, you've got provide substantial food. Shouldn't we list the timing it's available, so it should be available as soon as you walk in the venue, rather than sometimes you
Councillor Gould, this has come from a committee. It's not for us to amend and adapt tonight. We're really adopting tonight. That's the point that I just made. Otherwise, we could go on for, there's 124 pages. It's not for us really to go into that unless there is something glaringly, a glaring anomaly. Councillor Bentley, you have...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's really just a question of Nevin. Thank you for your report, Nevin. It's very full. Did you seek, or did you have anyone on your panel that was actually involved in the industry, rather than just councillors and your staff?
Question, but the questions were closed off. This was if any councillor wished to debate, but I'll allow that question for our clarification. Councillor Bentley, quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we started the process in 2010, and we had 15 public consultation processes where we met with the industry before we brought the draft policy to council for their approval, and they were targeted industries. So we met with the off licences, the supermarkets separately, the clubs separately, and then the restaurateurs separately.
So you're telling us the industry was involved. Thank
Yes.
you. I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you for your indulgence. We now move to page 120, which is the statement of intent. I'm just people to slow down with jumping in. It's becoming impossible for our staff to be able to get us up to the same page before someone jumps in with a recommendation. I'll call for a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Councillor Gould's moved. Thank you. Rick's now called up. Councillor Bentley seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. We now ask that Thomas is going to speak to the report.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, councillors. As you're aware, Rotorua Contracting was formed on August 2015. Since that time, the board has been actively working to prepare its first statement of intent and has delivered its draft for comment and any feedback from council. When you compare the statement of intent to some of our others, it contains all the necessary information regarded under legislation. It is quite a comprehensive statement of intent. However, there are a number of items in there which we are suggesting that can be removed from the statement of intent because it is matters covered under the company constitution or covered in their own internal policies. So on that, I'll hand it over back to Your Worship for any questions.
That's right. So this is question time. Councillor McVicker.
Your Worship. Page 131, financial targets. Not particularly challenging, and I read down below for the initial start-up years, but surely you would have requested a budget from them or a bit more financial information than pretty well a blank page?
Councillor, you're right, it is quite minimalist. The revenue targets that are sitting in there are contained within the LTP funding, are in line with the funding that we provide. If you'd like, we can go back and suggest that they include some more detailed if that is the wish of the council.
Madam Chair, have you not got any other financial information rather than just revenue at this point of time? So you have no idea whether they're going to be break-even, profitable, cost money?
Their budget does have them breaking even. We haven't included it, obviously, in here. It's got a net profit after tax of 0, so clearly we're after a net profit. I think the key as well is with regards to the performance of the CCO, it is a lot more than just the financial metrics. So it is the metrics from the Chief Operating Officer and his manager with regards to the performance that they undertake on the contracts, and that would probably have an equal weighting along with their financial performance.
Thomas, just a supplementary really on Councillor McVicker. Is this fairly standard in financial recording requirements of a statement of intent?
It would be the bare minimum, Your Worship. If anything, if you were to compare this statement of intent against probably one of the largest CCOs in the country being City Care, it's been modelled on their statement of intent.
Thank you. That sort of helps us a lot. Do you want to speak?
If I can add to that, I think the point in here is that this organisation is in an establishment phase, and so really what you're seeing is an establishment statement of intent. My expectation would be certainly once they have been operating for a year, they have their systems and processes in place, it would be at that stage you'd be wanting to start to look at performance and start setting some expectations which drove a different level of response.
Councillor Gould? Stuart, sorry, and then Councillor Gould.
Don't label me like that. Madam Chair, through you to the CEO and to Thomas, the whole reason I thought that we were putting Castle Corp into CCO was so that we could measure its performance. We aren't just going to give them a bulk amount of money from the LTP every 12 months and say, go and do what you've always done. I understood, and I'm pleased that that will come later, am I right, Thomas? The robust analysis of what they do, what they're involved in, levels of service and all those parameters, those operational things, we'll see it further on down, once they get established, as you've said.
That is correct, Councillor, and on the 25th of this month you'll have an opportunity to talk to the Chief Executive at the next Operations and Monitoring Committee, and he'll be able to update you on his progress to date on establishing some of those things.
Waipa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief question. I would like to perhaps, when they report to us, see a little bit more of what their plans are than just this bare minimum on the page 131. But at the moment, the only target I can see that's slightly improved is for them to, it says on this page and elsewhere, 500,000 or 600,000 from sources outside council. Do they do that now? I think, is that a stretch?
Through Your Worship, they do currently already have a little bit of other income, $200,000. So that is a bit of a stretch income for them to achieve on top of what they currently do.
Just wondered, in your opinion, Thomas, do you think that it's reasonable? Really, we're letting them bed in for 3 whole years. Do you think that's a little bit sort of soft? I would have hoped to have seen within even the 3rd year that they might be trying to improve a bit more.
For Your Worship, I think as the Chief Executive pointed out, I think in March next year when they come together and bring their next statement of intent together to us, to Council, we would be expecting to see a lot more information around some of their performance and improvement in that area.
Gould.
Madam Chair, I'm concerned with page 134, annual report and half-yearly reporting. Says the annual report within 3 months at the end of the financial year. Then you've got the 6 half-yearly reporting, which could be anywhere between 3 and 4 months later after that, which means that for about 8 or 9 months you're not going to get a report about the progress of the CCO. They employ a large number of council staff. They do a large amount of council work. And I know you can probably pick up something in the annual plan process if we request their presence at that particular process and ask some questions. So I think perhaps we should be looking at every 3 months reporting, because then we know exactly what's going on.
would you like to answer that?
Your Worship, the councillor raises a valid point. You'll recall I said before that Tim Hammond, the Chief Executive, will be at the next Operations and Monitoring Committee. The statement of intent really just outlines the minimum required. So what we've indicated to all our CCOs is that the councillors wish to have more frequent updates, and we have requested quarterly updates. So you will get a quarterly update on the 25th from all the CCOs except for T-Rex, so the four main ones. And that will continue into the new year as well, so which will be followed by a half-yearly update in February on the return, and then followed by another quarterly update in April or May.
No further questions. Do I have a mover and a second? Please allow me to put the full statement before anybody jumps in. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the following motion, that the committee resolves to make comment on the draft statement of intent as outlined in the report? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Rotorua, seconded by Councillor McVicker. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Before we move into public excluded and that resolution go into public excluded, I accepted an item of urgent business. I'm not sure if it's something we can decide on tonight, Councillor Sereng. Yep.
Inform councillors, really. I did ring the Mayor before I went to the meeting to inform her of the state of the public transport and the horrifying drop in patronage. So the total patronage has decreased in the 3 months from July to the end of September by 18%, which represents 49,800 people. So it's a huge drop. We guessed that would have hit about 8, perhaps 10. That was our worst scenario, because be mindful that in order to move the buses through town, through Arawa, Amahia and into the mall, the routes had to be shortened out in the suburbs and straightened. That you have to, because you can't keep a half-hour service going with winding through streets where a lot of people got on. I can quote you lots of roads that now don't have the bus going down where a lot of people. One of them is the Gardens, the elderly village there. That always went down the road there, Hodgkins, and did a round to McMahon and did a turn and came back again, so they were picked up at the gate. They now have to walk quite some considerable distance to the top of Malfoy Road. So there are lots of things that have happened that have contributed to this, and the big thing is, what can we do about it? And that's what the committee will be working on, and the regional council are equally concerned. They even call it a sobering figure, which I thought was quite a very good way to express it. So we need to find out what we can do, and one of the obvious things is, and that I wanted to update you, is that many of the services will be pushed out to 45-minute services, because the buses simply cannot get round the circuits in half an hour. It's impossible. And some of us knew that. We knew that would happen, because you can't add on a huge extension, and I drove it a lot in a car before it changed, and sometimes it would take me 12 minutes on a very busy day to get from Pukewatua right down Fenton, down Arawa, and if you struck traffic here, there and everywhere and into the mall, you could be up to 12 minutes. So that's where the position we're at. It has a monetary impact if we keep going this way, and incidentally the month of October is worse. Month of October is 19.5% for the month, decrease in passengers, further on from the 18%, and it represents a drop against the budget of 180,000, which is quite a lot of money, but all is not lost, but it just means that we have to be smart. Some of the bus stops are poorly signed, a lot of complaints about our new bus shelters. I've been down in Arawa Street for a couple of days just asking people what they think, and there's not enough seating in them. You've only got room for 2 people to sit in the bus shelter, in the new ones. Most of you have had a look at them, I'm sure, and the only thing you can do for everybody else is just lean against a board that is across the back of the shelter, whereas the old shelters, you could sit 6 people in there quite comfortably. And of course, in Pukawatua Street, we had the huge advantage of the shop verandas. So people in bad weather could wait under the shop verandas. But in Arawa Street, they have to stand in the weather, and that's all there is to it, because you can't get everybody in the shelters. So big teething problem, and a matter of what can we do about it. So we'll be keep informed and further discussions with the Regional Council.
JP, do you want to answer some of the observations that we get feedback?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I think probably one of the biggest concerns is the lack of the promotion around what was some quite major changes to the bus routes.
They're looking at that.
We certainly provided some feedback as we did about the desire to change the layout of the bus through the CBD. So we had their communications plan, and we had fed back to them that because of the magnitude of the changes, there needed to be a very extensive promotion plan that wasn't undertaken to the level that we thought was sufficient. There's equally probably a lack of signage and information about the ability to transfer around the CBD. Councillors, you'll recall one of our issues was to distribute what we had at Pukawatua Street. So that was one of our key thrusts to the Regional Council, and it was backed by the retailers and through the police as well about the concerns on the Pukawatua Street position. So we'd advocated a distributed model, so a loop around the CBD. I've just actually looked on the Regional Council's website, and it doesn't really promote what we'd been advocating all the way through, which was the free transfers around the CBD. So my understanding is that the free transfers are available, and if you drill into the Regional Council's figures on the decrease in the numbers of people moving on the buses, the biggest drop is actually in transfers, which, if correct, actually is attributed to what they said, which was there would be free transfers around that city core. So it will be very interesting to talk with them and get that analysis as to what those journeys and the changes of those journeys are. But one of the big contributors may be those transfers, which are down by 39%. Now, those are paid transfers. So now that they're free transfers within the CBD, that may actually be attributing to a change in behaviour. So I think we really need to spend some time talking to the Regional Council about how we promote the city loop. And again, that distribution of people to those other shelters and where there are verandas and cover, and also the fact that it is free to transfer around the CBD is very important. And so we definitely want to put some effort behind encouraging them to promote this.
Word of explanation, it is in their paper that they intend to do that. So I would just kindly suggest you talk with them and not at them.
It's good to raise the issue. I think it raises more questions than it does answers at this time. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. I've found the signage quite misleading myself. It's quite difficult to understand. So I think there's quite a few issues that we need to look at, and we always knew there would be teething problems here.
Is to actually ride the buses yourself. I've been doing that, and you talk to the people on the bus and they'll tell you what the problems are, believe you me, and there are a lot of problems.
I think it raises more questions than answers here tonight. Thank you. Do I have a mover to go into public excluded? Please, thank you. Seconded.
Your Worship, I wish to move an amendment to that motion.
Yes.
I wish to move that recommendation 4 be heard in public.
Councillor Kent, that makes the report public, and the timing is not right for the report to be made public. I cannot accept that motion. It's out of order. You've a mover to go into public excluded. Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary. Carried. Thank you.